Breaking Par is brought to you by Par Breakers Golf Academy online instruction, video swing analysis, and e-learning courses, and powered by Swing Guru 3D swing analysis software. The right move. To find out more, go to www.parbreakers.com. Welcome to this week's episode of Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the only weekly golf instruction podcast that helps you take control of your game. Now here's your host, the founder of Par Breakers Golf Academy, Bernard Sheridan.
So Brandi, thanks for stopping by at Breaking Par. We're really glad that you're here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So I gave the audience just a little bit of what you do, but let's get a little bit more in depth and tell us how long you've been involved in golf, and how long have you been involved doing what you do?
I guess I've been involved in golf for 27, 28 years now. Started playing when I was 7 or 8, and played collegiate golf. Then played out on tour for about 8 years. Had a couple years of LPGA status, and then the years in between on the Symetra Tour now. It used to be the Futures Tour. Trying to get back out there. Finished playing in about 2010 was my last full year, and I was working for a big national college recruiting company at the time, learning how to navigate the recruiting process for families and taking them through all that. And just realized I wanted to do it on a little more personal level. Wanted to add a little bit of the coaching aspect in there of what I had kind of learned through my golf career. So that's when I started my own business a little over 4 years ago now. It's been that I started my own business doing it, which is Brandi Jackson Golf. So it's a combination of the recruiting consulting, which is taking a family through the whole recruiting process, a lot of the mentorship side, along with the coaching aspect, which is no swing instruction. I get put in that category a lot, but that's one thing that I don't do. So I either set them up with a really good instructor that I know that they're going to be in good hands, or they're already with a good instructor. And if I'm going to work with them, it's on all the other areas of the game, short game, the on course, the mental side, and just teaching them how to practice, how to set goals, how to stay on track, tournament play, post-tournament rounds, that sort of stuff. So just kind of helping them navigate and kind of be a coach and mentor on that side of it.
Well, I would definitely say that's qualifies as instruction. There's no doubt about that. And it's more, like you said, it's more all-encompassing, so it's more of a coach type of a situation. And when you're working with these players, is there specific things that you put them through in paces? Like, because we just said, working on practice. So, I mean, there's a lot of listeners out there who would love to find out some of this information. What are these top players doing on a regular basis? How much time are they putting in? How much time are they putting in with you personally? Things like that, so that our listeners get an idea as to if they're looking for a coach and they want to get better, or they're a high-ranked athlete who wants to move to the next level. What are some of the things that they're doing to get them to that point? So, and I think that sounds to me like that's really your expertise, is to get them to that next level.
Yeah, that's kind of what it's centered around, is players that come in, whether they're a little bit younger, or even though I get a lot of like 8th, 9th, 10th graders that decided they want to play college golf. And I've had some adults that I've worked with. It's just really, a lot of what I do centered around the junior golf, and really a lot of girls. I sometimes turn the boys away if I don't feel like it's a good fit. I'm a little pickier about that relationship. So I've really tried to center mine around the girls and just really kind of be all about the girls and give them somebody in that sense. And I have a lot of different ways that I work with players. So I have players all over the country that I might just go see quarterly, or we may come in and spend 2 full days with them. So we'll do an on-course assessment, short game assessment, kind of a mental personality assessment, and then spend as much time as we can during that time kind of trying to really focus on their weakest areas so that they can start to work on those. That's probably one of the biggest things that I see is players who may know their weaknesses, but they admit that they don't work on them, and they don't really, nobody enjoys working on things you're not good at. My 8-iron was my favorite club, so sure enough, it was going to have the most worn-in grooves of any club. And I can remember when I first got out on tour, my college boyfriend was a really good golfer, and he caddied for me, and he mentioned that, I don't hit my long irons very much. I don't practice with them, and yet I was, at a new level, and that was something I was hitting a lot more of. So for a couple weeks, I really committed to hitting as much, if not more, long irons as I did short irons. And it was amazing the difference that made in my game. So just learning to identify some weaknesses, putting a little more time into that, not getting quite so technical with things. On the short game side of things, I do work with players based off of their assessment on some mechanical, or not even mechanical, some fundamentals with their short game, getting them to understand how to create different shots. But it's really just more about learning how to put it into play, how to practice it, how to practice with a purpose. It's the biggest thing that I see. Both kids and adults that spend a lot of time practicing, they never put any pressure on their practice. So that's a lot of what we do, is a lot of that developmental side of setting a goal with what they're doing, teaching them accountability, giving them drills where, we're not going to finish that day until you accomplish whatever we set up. It's really, for what I do, is coming to them a lot like a college coach does. So giving them structure. My goal this fall is actually to start to develop more of a weekly program with girls in the area. It's probably one of the things that I've wanted to do, just haven't had. And sometimes I don't have the time for it because I do so much individual. But a lot of what I do is for players, to really just be able to get in a more competitive setting. And, it's easy to tell somebody to do these things, but you're also talking about 12, 13, 16, 17-year-old girls and boys that are hard for them to really have the discipline and the accountability that, if they don't reach that goal. I know myself as a player, I worked really hard, but, sometimes you want to, cut corners and that kind of stuff. So it's just teaching them some of that to kind of better prepare them to get to the next level and take their game to the next level.
Well, I know that with a lot of the players that are out there, the first thing, at least with our listeners, and I think pretty much anybody who plays, they can be a really good player, but they really don't know how to go about working on their weaknesses, or how to go about practicing to create pressure that puts them in the situation that they're going to come up against when they're in an event, things like that. So, I mean, a good example of is, hey, we're taping this right after the U.S. Open, and talk about pressure. And Dustin Johnson succumbed to the pressure. It showed up in his putting. He was playing great, and then during the last 9 holes, we started to see him pulling putts. So more than likely, he probably in several, since he actually had a break off the tour too for a while, he probably really wasn't working on putting himself under pressure when he was putting, and I thought for sure that he was going to at least tie Jordan Spieth and go into, and I thought that we were going to be spending today watching 18 holes playoff.
Yeah.
But it did, and I thank God for Jordan that didn't happen. He was fortunate that things came out well for him, and now he's got 2 majors under his belt in 1 year, which is an incredible accomplishment even for some people for a lifetime, and to do it in 1 year is amazing. But so give us an example of, do you use games? Do you use little things that they'll do to simulate pressure? I mean, what are some of the things that you put them through to help them kind of feel that kind of pressure, especially, and it's got to be difficult if they've never been in that situation before. I'm sure that if you're dealing with a lot of juniors, they've never been in a really high pressure situation before, and now all of a sudden you're trying to put them in a pressure cooker and simulate that. And so what are some of the things that you do? And is it mostly is it a specific thing like putting, or is it kind of like all different things?
It kind of depends on the player. So the example of Dustin Johnson yesterday and what happened is one that I had a player that I knew he had a tendency on. It was one of my male players that I had that you had a tendency on shorter putts to get really aggressive with them. And part of what it's about is helping you kind of learn what your tendencies are. So, Dustin walking away from this may realize that, his tendency is to pull putts when he's under pressure. Or some people, have a tendency to leave them a little short. Or, it's the more you can put your game under pressure and practice, the more you can start to realize what is that tendency on, whether it's putts or chips. Some people have a tendency to hit chips a little thin, or maybe, something within your body that you do. the more you can figure out what those tendencies are, the more you can practice them, the more you can be aware so that before you make that mistake like he did, you can maybe know and just kind of give yourself that little cue to, maybe just to hold the putter face open a little longer as you go through, or just being aware of it. But one of the great ones that this player that I had, it's such a simple drill, but it really, I see some of what the players, learn from it is we set up 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 foot putts in a row. So sometimes we'll mix up and there'll be different spots around the hole, or start out with them being straight down the line. And they have to start at the 3-footer, make a 3-footer, and then work their way all the way back to the 11-footer, making all of them in a row. So if they miss one, they start back over. So for some, they can kind of breeze through it. And for others, especially if I know, or we'll do 4, 6, 8, 10, just trying to mix it up. And then what I'll have them do is they got to go back down the line. So it leaves them with that 3-footer or that 4-foot putt after they've been doing this for 15, 20, 30 minutes and have to keep starting over. Once they get back to that putt, especially I like finishing with a 3 or 4-footer. But also, had a player just qualify for the U.S. Junior Girls, and she had about a 10, 12-foot putt on the last hole for par. Luckily, it didn't end up making the difference. But, both of those distance of putts are great ones just to see the ball go in the hole once you've been working at a drill for so long. And you know that if you miss this one, you got to start all over again. And it might take you another 20 minutes to get through it. Like I said, it's a simple drill. It's just the higher the consequence for not achieving it and having to start back over, the more pressure you can put on yourself during practice. So that's one of them when I just have one player. A lot of times it's one of the first ways I kind of identify maybe some things that are going on in their putting. So something maybe fundamentally if they really struggle with it, maybe their alignment's off, maybe their pass just a little bit, into out or out to in. So then I'll set them on a good fundamental drill to help work on that. And then bring them back to that and see if it's, and kind of keep mixing that up. But once they've spent so much time and they keep getting back to that same putt and they keep missing it, they'll start to learn, what do I keep doing to miss it? So this particular player that I used to have would, he'd jam in 3-foot putts. And if he made it, it was fine. But if he didn't, then, he was going to have 4 feet coming back. So just helping him be more aware of that. So that was a great one that, something like what Dustin Johnson did will just help you when you get in that position just to remember, hey, I can make these putts when it counts. And you can never, there's no substitute for competition. So when I have players in a group setting, love to do competitions with them. And while you don't want to burn out junior golfers, the more they can compete, even if it's just these one-day events, the better they're going to get. I have a lot that really – they don't want to burn out, which I totally understand, or they only want to play these high-level tournaments, and then they may go a couple weeks without even playing. I just feel like the more that they can keep competing, the more you can find matches with people. Probably the thing is that I have the hardest with my girls is usually they're the only girl that plays at their golf course. And maybe they're a little scared to play with the boys or, so they just don't get any day in and day out competition. So that's some things that help, the competition, the drills you can set up that have a high, consequence goal. We do a lot of chip and putting combinations if the facility lets you chip and putt on it. So you got to make 3 in a row that you have to get up and down. So it gives you both that chip with that putt. So if you've done it and you keep doing it and you get to that 3rd time and you've got to make that 4-footer or else you got to start all over, just sets the bar a little higher that you put a little pressure on yourself for those putts. So that's a lot of the type of stuff that we work on. Just that performance, goal-based, high consequence. We do some things on the range as well, even though we're not working on swing. So I'll set up a series of you got to get a drive in a particular fairway. You got to get a short iron on a green. You got to get a drive in a fairway. Then you got to get a long iron on the green. You got to do that series of 4. Might be the last thing they do that day before they go home. So it just puts that, seeing that target, knowing you can pull off a shot without having to start all over again, and you get to go home a little early or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I think that the competition thing, I totally agree with you. And I know that the more that players put themselves in competition, the more comfortable they feel when it's time to be in competition. So it's kind of like if you, a perfect example for juniors is if they just get together with other players at least once a week, even if they're not playing in an event, or maybe during events, try to get friendly with some other players and say, hey, let's next week there's no event, but how about we play together and let's put something on it so that we can stay competitive. Things like that. And I think that most of the time juniors, because they're not adults, they're not thinking about that kind of stuff. They're thinking about, being social with their friends, hanging out, doing stuff like that, and, taking a break from it. And whereas I know that with at least most of the tour players that I know, who are, when they're not playing, they're looking for a money game someplace.
Yeah, no, I tell all my kids, and I had a guy, a friend of mine that plays a lot of golf, and he says the best thing that's made him get better is putting money on it. Yeah. Obviously, junior golfers can't necessarily do that. I'm sure there's some that do. But, you can't be out betting money. I get that. But it is 100% true. When you lose some money and you're going to be playing somebody again, I mean, it's, they say your money is where, your heart is where your money is in a way. And, it's what hurt me as a tour player was knowing that there was money on the line, and it became a little bit more about that instead of really the process and that kind of thing. But it is one of the best ways to make you get better. It's it's a great incentive. So finding some other ways around it, whether it's, who has to buy ice cream or, who has to, do somebody else's chores or whatever it may be, just some type of incentive for competition is, and the parent, if it is a kid out there that, maybe they do practice a lot more with their parents, and I always tell the parents, you don't always want to put a reward on something. I study and learn a lot about the intrinsic, motivators and the ones that have the internal motivation and don't always, feel like they should be getting something as a reward. So you want to find that balance of the two. As a younger player, I think you've got to keep some rewards and some incentives. I think as they get a little older, they got to start to develop a little bit more of just the internal drive, and they want to win just because they want it, not because they feel like they're getting something. But that balance of the two, I think, is important for young players and adults who, it's true. It's if you're willing to put a little bit of money on something, it's amazing how much better it can teach you how to practice or how to play under pressure.
Well, I know for me personally, whenever there was money on the line, I would actually either play a lot better or totally go the opposite direction, and just be so intimidated by that I or try too hard, and it wouldn't work out, and I would lose. So essentially, I know that for me personally, what I always tried to do was just try to beat scores. So even if I was betting against another player, I would just say to myself, okay, the personal best of mine is a 68, so I just need to shoot better than that today.
Yeah.
So what am I going to do to do that? And and then for me, I go through my trying to stay in process. And as long as I stay in process and not worry about what the other player is doing, then I usually do fine. I think that some players, they get a little bit more well, here's a perfect example. Ian Poulter. This is a guy who, when he's head-on, face-to-face, one-on-one, trying to beat another player, whatever that other player does, it motivates him to do better. So that type of a competition, he thrives on. He loves that, and he always rises to the level to play his best. When he's playing against a field or against himself, or old man par, and not worrying about what the other guys are doing, just focusing on what he's doing, he doesn't do as well. So I think that there's certain people Jordan Spieth, he just won the U.S. Open. So when we were just talking about that, he's a guy who, if he stays on worrying about his own game and not what the other guy is doing, that's when he plays the best. And if he has a couple of bad shots, like he had a double bogey, he puts it behind him and he stays with the shot that he has to do, and he focuses on, or doesn't focus on, just lets it happen, what he has to do at this moment, and let everything else just kind of disappear. And whatever the result is, he accepts. So I think that there's different types of players who, they thrive in different situations. So I think that probably those players, or at least for our listeners out there in Par Nation, you have to figure out kind of what kind of player are you, and then kind of use that to your advantage to be able to chase after what you need to do and get better. So for some of these players, give us an idea because you're working with juniors who are trying to move up in the ranks. You said that you do some consulting or advising to them. So if we had a young lady or a young guy who's a freshman in high school, is going out for the team, and their aspiration at this point, let's say, is to eventually become a tour player. What type of steps do you put them through, or what would you say to them as to a path that they should get started on to begin that journey?
It is kind of specific to where that player's at and what they're already doing from a swing coach perspective. Some are maybe getting overcoached in some way. Some are not utilizing their swing coach maybe as much. But it's kind of being a little more specific to that player. And some are a little more technical. Some are, are just kind of more. And I was not a technical player, so I probably gravitate sometimes towards those players that really get the fundamentals without having to be overcoached, that just need the more performance, a lot more of the on-course mental part of it. But it's for them, a lot of times too, it's developing, and again, the players that have goals of playing at a higher level in college and out on tour, it's a different path than one who maybe doesn't have that. Doesn't mean one's better than the other. But the path's going to be a little more strenuous because to play at that level, I mean, you've got to be willing to travel for tournament golf. You've got to have that commitment both from the parents, financially it's got to be there. So it's kind of trying to fit together, where finances can be spent the most. Does it need to be spent more on coaching for a certain time period? Does it need to be spent more on playing in tournaments? It's really a big part is developing the tournament schedule based off of that. And in trying to get in the better tournaments, the bigger tournaments, playing the better state events. And working a lot with the tournament performance side of it. In some cases, it's getting them with a trainer. From a strength standpoint, I don't feel like it's completely necessary, especially as a freshman and sophomore. But I do get a lot of girls that need a little bit more strength, especially golfers who've not played other sports or maybe gave it up at a really early age and didn't develop some of those natural abilities. I mean, you see Dustin Johnson, you see Jordan Spieth, you see Jason Day. These guys are actual athletes. On the girls' side of it, you see Lexi Thompson, you see Michelle Wee. They're all athletes, and they're not just golfers. Maybe they didn't play another sport, but they've really put a lot of emphasis on the training side of it. So I feel like without overloading the kids, getting them a taste of that, getting them to develop some natural athletic ability, some golf-specific skills and strength that they need. That's another big component that I really encourage. Sometimes during the season, maybe just getting them in once a week with somebody, and then during the off season, upping it to at least 2 weeks, 2 days a week of some sort of training I think it's really important. And then some on the mental side of it, just depending on where they're at with that. It's some of the things I focus on with them. Some will find them a good mental coach and see, again, so there's a lot of junior offers that really go overboard and they feel like they got to have all this stuff, but there's some of them that need some of that area, whether it's the mental, whether it's the physical part. They need more of that. So we try to identify some of that, set them on a plan for that schedule, and then just getting them to understand the timelines of things right now. It's so much earlier. Players are getting better at such an earlier time. However, everybody has different peaks. I've got several players that are just going into their senior year of high school, and in a lot of cases, recruiting that's considered very late in the process now. But I have some that really kind of waited out the process, and some coaches that did it as well. And they're starting to see the girls really develop a little bit more at this point. So it's knowing that everybody has a different timeline, but also really emphasizing that you can't just sit back and expect it to happen for you. It's kind of counterproductive because you say it's about being patient, but at the same time, it's about feeling a sense of urgency. I tell them, really try to feel that urgency when you're practicing with your day in and day out routine. But then when it comes to competition and the overall process, it's being a little bit more patient and knowing that you can't force it. And the more you try to force it, the more you're going to set yourself back. So that's just some of the areas and the advice for the ones. And like I said, the ones that want to go out and play on tour, and had those aspirations. We're going a little bit more hardcore with stuff where, we're really trying to maximize the time and resources we have to get them into. It doesn't mean that they have, I think a lot of them feels like it means they have to play a super high level of college golf. And I have to emphasize that maybe they're a little bit later in the developmental process, that if they go there, they may not get enough of a chance to play. And that's one of the harder things that I fight, is the players all wanting to go to these big name schools and thinking that's the route. But there's a lot of players that came from mid and even lower level D1 schools that had found a really good coach, got a chance to go out and play. They really played well and had just as much success as ones who maybe played. And actually, some of the success that comes out of the top ranked programs isn't as good as ones that went to just a middle ranked Division I program or a better ranked Division II program. So it's just trying to figure out what that path's going to be for them.
So do a lot of these players, when they're playing, in college golf, are they playing in amateur events too, outside of school, like, going to just standard amateur events that they will enter, or are they playing on, and let's say for high school kids, do you encourage them to get involved in junior PGA events? Things of that nature, or are they just, everything is collegiate? I mean,
well, the juniors and seniors in high school, the better players will start looking at some of the actual amateur events, some of the events where a lot of the college, especially during the summer, where a lot of the college players are playing. It's usually a limited amount that the junior players can get in, but my better players just had one play, the Women's Western Am, and it was probably 80, I don't know what percent was collegiate players, but a big chunk were collegiate players. So it was a great experience for her to see where she really stacked up against. So your better juniors and seniors will start mixing in some of the AM events. They'll try to qualify for the U.S. Women's Am. The boys will try to do the U.S. Men's Am, not just the U.S. Junior, so you've got both. So as they start getting a little later into their like junior and senior year, it's a great chance for them too. It's a lot of what they'll do to play summer going into freshman year of college to better prepare them for college, because you're usually already out-aged with the junior tournament. So there's a big, pretty big chunk of amateur. It's a lot of times requires a little bit more travel just because there's not as many amateur events as there might be junior events. But I played the state am. I was actually, speak to Ian Poulter, I was actually a very good match play player. I thrived off of the match play setting and won our state match play going into my freshman year of college, I think, and going into my sophomore year, or one of those combinations. But playing your state amateur events, there's a lot of regional and national amateur events, and it's what most college players will do during the summer as well. Some take a little bit of a break. I think it kind of depends on just where they're at and how much they play during the year. The ones that maybe aren't getting much playing time, they really need to be playing during the summer and getting ready to grind it out for the fall. I'm partnered with the Peggy Kirkbell Girls Tour. They just launched a collegiate series for the summer for the collegiate players to come and play. It's an individual plus a team competition. So trying to fill that gap, because there is some for the summer events, probably a lot more for the boys. But for the girls, trying to provide some more opportunities for the collegiate and incoming collegiate players to play the amateur events and get some more competition. If you play every event during the school year as a college player, it's a grind. And I think you're deserved of a little bit of a break, but the coaches are expecting you to still keep competing and keep going right on through, especially if you have those aspirations of playing in college. I did the USAM qualifier every year, fortunate to get into a couple of those, and played really well one year, made it to the finals. And, there's like the Trans Am for the girls. There's a lot of different opportunities out there, and same thing with the boys.
So as players get a little bit better, or let's say they're out of college now, and they still want to pursue getting out on the tour. So what is the route that most of these players take? Are they going to Monday qualifiers? Or are they enrolling to events? Or are they, because a lot of our listeners who are out there, they might not know what really the process is. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't know the process. So fill us in on that.
The guys and the girls, it's a lot different. The guys have a lot more mini tours. That's usually what most guys coming out of college are going to do, because even to get out there is extremely tough. Being here in the Southeast, there's a lot of opportunities for some sort of regional mini tours. And then obviously, the goal is trying to get out to the web.com at least, because that's now the route to go to the PGA Tour. There's no more, PGA qualifying like there used to be. And I believe the LPGA is in talks as well to possibly make the Symetra Tour be the only route. From the guy side of it, it's really about playing the mini tours, trying to do web.com qualifiers, trying to work your way at least onto the web.com, then through that getting out to the PGA Tour. I'm sure there's some that mix in some Monday qualifiers for PGA Tour events. But going that route can be very, very tough. You get a little more, you can really kind of burn yourself out trying to travel to qualifiers and trying to get back to whatever tour you're playing on to play that week. But if there's one local, it's definitely worth, trying to get into those. And then on the girls' side, it's good and bad. It's a little, I hate to use the word easier route to get out there. There's not as many girls competing. There's also not as many opportunities. There's not as much money to try to, help reward you to keep you out there. But they do have, we have the Symetra Tour. There is still LPGA Q School, and you can actually, it changed since I was in school. When I was in school, you could only go do the Futures Tour, Symetra Tour qualifying. So then when you could do that while you were a senior in college, you graduate, and then play a few of those events and then go to LPGA School. NCAA now allows you to go to LPGA School during your senior year of college, or at least one time, I believe. You can go and stay an amateur, not hurt your NCAA status. Try to go, so that's during the end of fall, so you would do that. There's actually been a few players that have gone and done that and gotten status and then decided to leave school and not come back for a spring season. A lot may get some partial status, wait until the summer, turn pro, play that summer. If they don't play well, you'd be back at Q School and trying to get your Symetra Tour status for the next year. So that's a typical route. There is a Suncoast Tour down in the Florida area for the girls, and then a Cactus Tour out on the West Coast. That is some fill-in kind of mini tours for the girls. A little bit of money out there to be made. So you have to be either in the Florida area or more like the Arizona West Coast area for those two. But a lot of girls are in the off season, and if they don't have Futures Tour, Symetra Tour status, will play that. But the I'd be interested to see whether the LPGA follows in step with the PGA to get rid of Q School. It's a great moneymaker for the tour, there's no doubt. But you're also kind of basing performance off of one good week, as opposed to the Symetra Tour and the web.com, where you're playing week in and week out. And I feel like it's a little better test of who really can be more successful. Would love to see some stats on the success rate. I used to kind of keep up with the ones that made it out on tour from Q School, as opposed to the top 5, top 10 finishers from the Symetra Tour and which ones had better success. I think you'll start to see it shift a little more that way, because you're proving that for a whole year you can beat out the best, as opposed to just 1 week where you might have 2 good rounds. Or in some cases, we used to have players that would go back to Q School every year, played really good on that golf course, would get through, and then just never have much success out on tour.
Yeah, so I know that, and I agree with that. That I believe that 1 week that they're going to play in Q School, it's kind of, like you said, they could actually just have a bad week and it's done. Mm-hmm. Or they could have a great week that might be like a career week. They get out there, and then all of a sudden now they're trying to compete, and it's just really tough. But if they're out there, because golf is a game of ups and downs, you're going to have really good weeks, and then following weeks you might not have as good. And we see that all the time on both tours. Or players there's not a lot of players who are constantly consistent and, let's say, in the top 10 for year after year after year. It's really difficult to do. I mean, it's just because of the way the sport is. It's just such a tough sport to stay consistent all the time. But when you look across the board at other sports too, it's the same way. I mean, you look at baseball. There's players who can maybe be batting .250, and then the next year they're batting .175, and then the year after that they're batting .350. So it's it's just the nature of sports in general, and there's a lot of other things that go behind it: mental things, injuries, physical limitations, personal life. I mean, it can go on and on and on, because it's so much just like life too, that all those things kind of roll into it. But I think that if players are playing constantly, that at least they can show that they can stay at a certain level, then they deserve to be out there, and that makes a big difference. You mentioned that that on the LPGA, when you get down to the Samara Tour and things like that, the money is not as good. So for players who are out there, do you encourage them to try to find a sponsor, or someone to back them to help them, achieve
Yeah.
this goal, like maybe at their local club, or just do things that are like fundraisers? I know I've seen a couple of players do like a Kickstarter thing where they said, hey, here's what I can do, but I just don't have the cash. I have the talent, but and even when I get out there, it's still really hard to travel and to be able to cover all my expenses. So if you do this, then you get a percentage point of what I make if I get out on tour eventually, or things like that. Do you encourage that with your players?
Yeah, especially on the women's side. I mean, even the men. I've got come up with a lot of the guys here in South Carolina area. We have a big junior golf collegiate contingency here, especially in the upstate of South Carolina. So know a lot of the guys that are still my age that are still trying to play out there. And even on their side, at least it's a little easier financially. But especially on the women's side of it, I mean, you almost have to have somebody backing you. I mean, you're just, even the ones that get LPGA status, I mean, your first 6-8 weeks are spent traveling overseas, and some of the events do help with the travel. But now that whole first chunk of being out on tour, you'll spend 20 or 30 grand just in the first 6-8 weeks of being out on tour on the LPGA side of it. So you certainly do. There's a lot of different ways. Trying to find just true sponsors these days is a lot tougher that aren't going to want something back. If you can find that, a logo sponsor or whatever it may be, I mean, that's ideal, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20 grand, selling your spots on your shirts and your bag and all that. That's what you're obviously looking for. It typically ends up being, because there's not the exposure. So it typically ends up being, for me, I was lucky to have somebody help me, especially my first 2 years, who did it as more of an investment. So I did give a percent of my earnings back. And it was just one person that gave me a big chunk of what I needed, which was great. Some will get together and get a group of, 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever it may be, and sell shares. So for how much ever you put in, that's the percent you get back. A lot of different ways of doing it, or doing, a big fundraiser. My golf course did do one big fundraiser for me when I first got tour status. And, just did a kind of donation type of thing, which was awesome. So, a lot of different ways for doing it. Now with the internet, I'm not that old, but we didn't have a lot of this stuff with social media and kind of building your brand through the internet.
Sure.
But making yourself marketable online and through social media, and maybe using one of the fundraiser online things is a great way to help yourself out. Because, I mean, it's tough to spend the off season trying to work, because you don't get much of an off season, so you can't really make much money. And then if you're not living at home, you're still trying to make money just to pay your living expenses during the off season. So it really takes a good backing of at least about 20 or 30 grand a year, to even just get you through your basic expenses for just traveling on tour. And that's really minimal right there. So coming up with some creative ways, or getting guys, for a smaller amount of money, even if you've got 20 or 30 people all putting up $1,000 or $2,000, at least it's not as big of a chunk of investment for them.
Sure, absolutely. I know that Zach Johnson, when he started on tour, he actually had a group at his club that put up money to help him get out there, and then he gave them a small percentage point once he got out there, and for those people, that was probably a wonderful investment opportunity, because he's done very, very well. Yeah. So as we're winding down here, give us some information as to how folks who are in that area can get in touch with you, so that they can get information to work with you or to get your help.
Yeah, you can visit my website, which is brandyjacksongolf.com, Brandi with an I. My email, you can contact me anyway through that. I'm also very active on social media, Facebook. I have personal page, and then my Facebook page is Brandi Jackson Golf. Twitter, I'm B Jackson Golf. Same thing with Instagram. So pretty easy to find me through all that. You can look me up, Google my name, and you'll find a lot of my tour history and that kind of stuff. Pretty easy to find, and like I said, stay pretty active through social media. And you'll also find, as you can hear in the background, my dog likes to participate every now and then on things. Everybody enjoys. I think he's as popular as I am through things. I go to golf tournaments with him, and people want to see him, and they probably ask me more about him than they do myself. So he likes it to be known that he runs a house around here. But yeah, Brandi Jackson Golf. It's easy to find. Follow me on all social media, and I try to keep it as fun and entertaining as I can, but also educational and some relevant, important information as well.
Well, thanks so much for being with us today and taking time out of your schedule, because I'm sure that you're a very busy person. And the information that you gave us today was just great. I mean, there's a lot of insight there, and it's great for young players to understand some of the process they have to go through to achieve their dreams. So until we meet again, and what I always say to all my guests is, try to keep it in the short grass. I'm sure that you already do that, but we always like to say that in party.
I try to. Don't play much anymore, but I do try to do that when I do get a chance to play.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
Thanks. You too.
All righty.
Now you can take control of your game right now from your smartphone, tablet, or desktop. Just go to www.parbreakers.com/e-learning. That's www.parbreakers.com/e-learning. Your game will thank you for it.